So Fiji, I was lucky enough to get a chance to go to Fiji last month to do some studies with the Fijian banded and crested iguanas. There are a couple different species that live in Fiji. One of the weird things about Fijian iguanas, they're the only iguanas that don't live in North, Central, or South America. So iguanas as a group are all in the New World in the Americas, and then you've got a couple random species over in Fiji. Their closest relative, genetically speaking, is actually the desert iguana from Southern California, which is also really odd. Fiji is a pretty unique place in that it's estimated to have been separated from any other landmass for like the last 40 million years. So things have had a lot of time to change in that period. In body shape, in a lot of ways, there's actually some significant similarities to the desert iguana. I can show you pictures later if you guys want to check that out. It's really kind of odd, but so they're very unique. And in both the Fijian banded iguana and Fijian crested iguana species, they are considered to be endangered, in some cases critically endangered. And so part of our goal is to figure out how endangered are they, and starting to really study the genetics to figure out what's going on with the different populations. Again, the big problems, kind of like with the rock iguanas, dogs and cats, goats are actually a big problem there as well, because they eat seedlings of a lot of the trees, and then you don't get recruitment for future forest development. And so in some of the forests where they live, where goats have been on those islands for many years as a result of people, the forests are very degraded. And then just cutting down forest habitat as well has been an issue for them. So this has really been a question of how many species are there? Because we know that there's on one side of Fiji a crested iguana, on the other side a banded iguana, but nobody's really done a lot of looking to figure out how many there are. So in the past 3 years, they've already described one new species, so we now know that instead of 2, there are 3. Estimates are that there's probably 7 to 8 distinct species of these Fijian iguanas. So now we're looking at a group of lizards much like the Caribbean rock iguanas, with many different varieties. But what that does is it also then reduces the population size of most of these species. And I'll show you a map here of Fiji. So over here on the west side, we have crested iguanas that live on 100 different islands out there. On the east side over there, we have banded iguanas, which used to be, basically used to draw a line right here in the middle and say, those are banded, these are crested. We have identified that this is a distinct species now down here at the bottom, the Lao banded iguana. If you've been to the zoo and seen, we have a couple of Fijian iguanas on exhibit there. That's what we have, is the Lao banded iguana. We found that out after describing this new species. But all of these areas are likely to get cut into much smaller pieces, as we describe, again, 7 or 8 potential species within this whole range. So that then informs our conservation priorities, right? What used to be one species in a whole big area, now you may have 2 or 3 tiny islands representing the entire species, right? Yes?
Just curious, is there any iguanas on the main island?
Right, that's a great question. There are not, at least that anyone has been officially able to confirm. The main island down here, the bigger island, there's been a lot of deforestation. It's not even known if historically there was an iguana there on that island, at least in any kind of recent history. There is even evidence, this is kind of crazy, that there was like a giant Fijian iguana back a ways, but that's been a long time since that one disappeared. There have been some recent reports that up on the upper island there, San Elijo Lagoon, that there may be some iguanas there from pretty reputable sources, but no one's been able to officially confirm it with a real iguana in hand. But many of these smaller islands do have iguanas there. Now what do they look like? What are the differences? The crested iguanas, up on the top right there, that's a male. Down here on the bottom, that's a female. I'll show you a slide in a minute that shows the island where we found these iguanas. It was pretty interesting because no one's actually seen or photographed this particular island's iguanas in 15 years. And they've really only been observed like 2 or 3 times. So that was a pretty cool treat to be one of like the first people to get to photograph these iguanas. But you can see the male has a big crest along the back there with kind of the black and white zebra pattern, very distinct bands. And then the female is quite a bit smaller, and you can see less of a crest there. So male and female, they're very dimorphic in that sense. More drastically in the banded iguanas. So you can see the crest, even on a male up there on the top, it doesn't have that black and white color. They do have a much more blue color on their banding. The females, in contrast down here, barely have banding at all. They're almost completely green with some speckles of blue along their body. So to compare and contrast, again, we're looking at two very different types of animals. And then if you were to compare these even to those low-banded iguanas, you're going to start to see some differences. But really, genetically is where we start to see the biggest differences between them. So the particular place that we were visiting is down here, pretty close to the mainland actually. It's about a 2-hour boat ride. We were up on the island of Monu. That's where we took photos of those two iguanas. In 2 full nights of hiking, we found 2 of them. That was all we found. It was the 3rd time that they had been to that island and the 1st time they had actually found any that they could get genetic samples from. So it was a very good thing that we found 2 of them. The island down here on the bottom is the interesting one that we're going to talk a little bit about. It's called Monteriki Islands, and it was famous for the movie Castaway. That's where the movie Castaway was filmed with Tom Hanks. It's also the site of where we've been reintroducing some of these Fijian crested iguanas. Now the island on the right side there is called Yanuya, and that is where the tribe that owns Monu and Monteriki lives. Now you'll notice there are not very many trees on that island over there. It's almost completely deforested. No iguanas that live there, and that's just as a result of the agriculture and things that they've done there. And so their goats live on Monteriki down here in Monu Island. That's where the goats go to live, and then when they need goats, they bring them back to the island. So that's kind of their system of farming. So Monteriki has been kind of a long-standing story, and so again, we visited the island there on our trip. This is the coconuts that spell help that were on the beach for Tom Hanks was there. They've replaced them many times because when cyclones come through, all the coconuts disappear. But so it is a tourist destination now, and there are people that come and visit the island. And so for years, there was this conversation going on with the tribe that owns this island to try to get them to remove the goats because of the issues that were going on with causing the forest to really not be able to regenerate. And as far as the village was concerned, this was part of their livelihood. They needed goats in order to survive, and so they just kept saying no. This is a picture of, on the left, his name is Johnny. He's the coordinator for Fijian iguana conservation in Fiji. The guy on the right here is Carlton. He came with us from USGS. They're one of our partners in this project. And so he has been having a conversation with this tribe on Yanuya for years, trying to get them to remove these goats. And what I found really interesting is, as he was telling me this story, in this case, when we talk about what solved the problem, it really wasn't any kind of cool technology or clever idea. What they did is, instead of asking them to remove the goats, Johnny went to them and he said, "Can we take some iguanas?" And they said, "Why do you want iguanas?" And he said, "Well, we have noticed that their population is disappearing, and we want to take 10 iguanas. We want to start a breeding program at a local facility on the main island of Fiji so that we can help their population to grow." And after asking them if they could have iguanas, they said, "You can have iguanas, and we're going to remove the goats." Because they started to understand what the point of it was. The point wasn't just to get the goats off the island, which to them were their livelihood. The point was to save this resource, this natural heritage of Fiji, which is a very prevalent animal in their culture. They call it vokai. And so asking a different question was really what started the ball rolling to create a solution that was going to work. And so as a result, they were able to remove the iguanas, started a breeding program, and over the course of about a year removed all of the rats and goats from the island. So it is now completely rat and goat free, which is amazing. Again, that was with some other partners as well that were providing some of the funding to do that. And so the breeding colony then has since had, the first year had 32 babies that hatched and survived. And so they raised them there for a couple of years, and just last year released them back onto Monterey Island. There's another, I think, 18 that are waiting to be released this fall that will go out there in November. And then at that point, we think the original iguanas are actually going to return to the island as well, because that was the deal with the tribe on Unuya. We weren't going to keep them forever. We want to return those original iguanas as well. So it's been a really cool community-based conservation project that really only could succeed if the community bought into it, right? Because they literally own the island. You can't do anything there without their approval, and it's been cool to see that they now are supporting this new initiative.
Where did the goats go?
The goats were, in most cases, killed, but I think that some of the goats were moved to potentially Monu Island. I'm not entirely sure. They came in and caught most of them until there was a small enough number that some of them had to be just killed and removed. But they had, rugby's a huge sport there in Fiji, and so they had their local rugby team come out and catch goats, which I think is brilliant. Like, that's a perfect way to train, and then you're also, you know, removing goats from the island. So it's been a really cool, again, that story, that dialogue, that in this case was what helped to make this program successful. And we'll see where we go with all of these genetic results. We were able to get samples from another island there as well, which is all adding to this puzzle to figure out where these species fit together and where we're going to prioritize for protecting these iguana species. We're going to bring it a little more local. Right here in San Diego, we have
One quick question before you jump.
Yeah,
Just, you know, okay, so you're getting the invasives out, which is going to indicate, you know, good things for reforestation.
Sure.
Hopefully. Any other keystone species that stand to benefit besides the iguana? You know?
Yeah, so there actually is, one of the partners in this project was BirdLife International, because there's a species of shearwater that nests on this island. And so they were wanting to remove the rats, especially because they are a huge problem for eggs, because they're a ground nesting bird. And so that's the other main species. There's also a species of peregrine falcon that lives in Fiji that, according to what I heard, there were like 6 pairs left total. And one of the islands where they nest is like the very top of Monterey Island. So that's another species that will hopefully benefit from this as well. Yeah. So locally, the southwestern pond turtle is really our only native turtle species here in San Diego County. Has anybody ever seen one before? Couple? Yeah. The only place I've seen them in the wild was like driving out almost to Julian and then hiking like 3 hours to the middle of nowhere. And then I get to a stream and I hear plunk, plunk, plunk in the water, and I knew I found turtles. I saw maybe 4 or 5 of them out there. It was pretty cool, because that's one of the only places you're going to find them now, unfortunately. The big issues for the southwestern pond turtle are red-eared sliders, introduced turtle species, which, according to the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, the red-eared slider is one of the 100 most invasive species on the planet worldwide, because they have been introduced almost globally, and they can survive pretty much anywhere. They can live all the way up in places where it freezes over in the winter, and they can live in a tropical rainforest. So unfortunately, they are built to be invasive. And they're a lot bigger than our local southwestern pond turtle. But we obviously want to help make a difference with the animals right here in our own backyard. So I've been able to be a part of some of the studies that are happening out in the field. This is definitely a collaboration with local partners like USGS. The one I didn't mention, the African clawed frog, is another invasive species, obviously not native to San Diego with a name like that. And that has caused some problems, mostly for recruitment, again, of young individuals. They're getting out-competed for food. And so we see adults surviving in this population, but not a lot of babies. So working with USGS, a couple other partners that are doing long-term monitoring studies, and as a result of some of the studies they were doing, they were able to bring us some gravid females about 7 years ago rabbit being pregnant with eggs, right? And when they found the females, they brought them to the zoo. The eggs were laid at the zoo, and we became that Head Start facility. And so we incubated the eggs, they grew up, and after about 5 years, we released them back into the wild. And so we've been able to use radio telemetry to continue to monitor those turtles also. And that's one of the great things about conservation as we move forward. There's so much technology that allows us to find out if what we're doing works. To be able to follow these turtles. Some of these turtles actually have radio telemetry tags that can not only tell us where they are, they actually tell us the temperature where they are, so we can figure out if they're like sitting at the bottom of the pond when we're doing this with the radio telemetry and we can't find them. Odds are they're probably in the water, and we can actually tell based on the temperature if they're out basking, if they're down at the bottom of a pool. And so that's been really helpful also. And I can't say enough about collaboration. That's something that we've been able to definitely take advantage of, both locally and globally. But with this local work with the southwestern pond turtle, we don't have the manpower to be able to go out and do these long-term studies. But working with USGS, we then can provide a piece of that puzzle to provide the captive management that we know well, and to be able to help release and reintroduce those turtles also. And one of the cool things about this particular project is, in terms of what I do, since I'm in the education department at the zoo, we do a lot of outreach programs, going out and teaching. We teach right here at the Elfin Forest. We have a whole program that talks about the southwestern pond turtle and the radio telemetry that we use out in the wild. We actually bring that to the classroom. We give the kids a chance to track down a turtle on their school campus, which of course is not real, even though I would love to. They won't let me release a real turtle on their school campus. But we actually get to go track a turtle as a whole class, and they follow around and they listen to the device beep, and I think it's been a great way to connect students to this species that they may never see in the wild because of how rare they are, unfortunately, now. But it's a really cool way that we're able to draw them in with local conservation. Questions?
I might have missed it, but did you, other than tracking, do you have some of them in captivity breeding? Or?
We do have some that are breeding. We have an exhibit at the zoo that is home to a group of pond turtles that were actually donated, you might say, to the zoo when one of our exhibits opened, Elfin Odyssey, about 7 years ago. We kind of put out a little notice to people because it's technically illegal to have these guys as pets. Since they are an endangered species, we said if you have one and you want to give it to the zoo, we won't have any issues with that. And so we actually have a large population that is breeding there. Unfortunately, because we don't know where they came from, we're not releasing those back into the wild. And because of permits, it's hard to really build a larger captive breeding program. So at this point, we don't have any more slated for reintroduction, but I know that our curator for herpetology is very involved in southwestern pond turtle work, and so we're hoping to find more ways that we can be a support in that. Yeah.
So, when you are out in the field, do you guys like round up any red-eared sliders that you find and
yeah, the work that I was doing with these guys, they were removing invasive crawfish and clod frogs. We didn't catch any red-eared sliders that day, so I don't know if, I'm assuming that they're removed, but I don't know for a fact if that's happening in that project. But we're using essentially turtle traps so that we can monitor the native ones, and I'm sure that they catch. I will say the one site that we were at, it was pretty remote. We didn't actually find any turtles that day, which was not too good, but it also meant that we weren't finding red-eared sliders, so I'm not sure how many are in that area. Obviously, in most of San Diego, red-eared sliders are pretty dense in population, but the farther you get out east, they aren't nearly as common. Yeah. A couple amphibian projects as well. The mountain yellow-legged frog is sort of a local species. They used to be native to San Diego County. They're actually extinct within our county now, but they can be found up north in Riverside County. And so they're an interesting amphibian because we think of San Diego obviously as a very warm desert kind of type habitat, but living in the mountains, it's actually a very different environment. And so This species of frog has very different requirements than a lot of others. The big issues for them have been some disease issues, but also some invasive species, like some non-native trout that have been introduced in some of the streams where they live. And so their range has really been restricted by elevation, places that those trout can't get to. That's where they can survive. And so they're living very, very high up in the mountains, and that's the only place we're really finding them. Where they were living in San Diego County was a little bit lower, and they were pretty much removed from that. There's also potential disease issues, which we'll talk about a little bit. So all of that being said, the population was crashing pretty quickly, dropped to probably under 200 individuals. They're not entirely sure what the number was. There were 8 known populations up in the mountains outside of LA. And most of those populations were like 20 or 30 individuals. And so we jumped on an opportunity when there was a group of tadpoles found that was in a little pool that was drying up. And government red tape is always fun, right? They literally almost let the tadpoles dry up before we could get the permit to get them out of the water. But we did, successfully. We removed the tadpoles, we brought them into, up to the Institute for Conservation Research, and we started a breeding colony there at the Institute. And for years they were doing fine. They grew up from tadpole age, they were adults, and they were doing well, but there was no breeding going on. We would get like one female who would lay like 5 eggs, and normally they would lay clutches of hundreds of eggs at the time. And so it was a little confusing as to what was going on. And we knew they were from cold mountain streams, so the water they were in was nice and cold. They were in an air-conditioned room. It seemed like it should be fine, but we weren't quite taking into account the true seasonality that happens where they're living up in the mountains. And so that was where the aha moment happened in this project. Somebody suggested, well, if we need to really put them through a hibernation period, why don't we just buy some wine coolers and stick them inside for 4 months? And we did it. And so again, compared to the native habitat, there wasn't a natural hibernation happening in captivity. We got wine coolers and we stuck them inside for about 4 months. Every couple of days we'd have to do a water change, but they looked like they were just basically floating frogs because we put them down to about 34, 36 degrees. So it was really cold. Normally you don't do that to a frog, but we tried it, and the result was lots of babies. The first year, I think there were, that was the year I was working, and there were I think about 800 eggs. And this is a group of like 60 frogs, like 30 females, 800 eggs. Pretty good. It was a large number, certainly compared to like 5 the year before. So it was pretty clear that this was working.